how do you get your undergrads to engage with the library, both its collections, materially, books, electronic materials, and also its archival collections? This is a problem that I had. I'm sure you've had it as well with your undergraduate classes. And I was thinking, how do I address this problem by getting my students to both deal with these two different types of materials and also to bring them together into a project where they feel satisfied with something that they have accomplished at the end of the quarter? The project that I developed, called the Chopin project, is something that was used for Music 101. However, the ideas of this project can actually be applied to basically any class, which is why I'm going to distill out the ideas and then show you how I applied them for my students. The first step that I gave my students was to actually find a set of materials. And once they had one set of materials, they needed to go find a second set of materials and then a third set. And if at any point along the way, from second to third, they didn't find the results that they needed, they had to go immediately back to the first item and to find a new piece of material. So how does this work with the actual project? The first place that they had to go was the Chopin Early Editions website, which they can find through the University of Chicago. They needed to find a piece of music by Chopin, piano music specifically, solo piano. And once they found this, they needed to go to the recording collection and find an actual CD that the university has in its physical collection that they could check out and bring. And the third set was to find a score, a modern score of the piece of music that they found. If they didn't find a recording, back to step one. If they didn't find a score, back to step one. And so they could have found both an early an early score and a recording, and then they couldn't find a modern score, and then again, back to step one. So what did this force them to do? Well, they needed to use the Chopin Early Editions website to figure out how to find the materials and to actually access the catalog and how the recordings, the materials have been recorded in the catalog. Then they needed to go find a recording using the University of Chicago website catalog. And this means that they had to figure out how to do an advanced search, changing the settings to actually find CDs, etc. And then finally, when they needed to find a score, they needed to figure out how to input the material to find both Chopin and the title of the piece, be it Polonaise, Mazurka, etc., and also the opus number that each of these pieces would go with. Because if you know Chopin, you know that he wrote a lot of piano music. So there was a lot of trial and error in actually finding these materials. Now, once they had all of these things together, they were in groups. And the second step of the project was to have them collaborate amongst themselves. Now, if this were not a music class, you can have them bring together whatever primary source material you'd like them to look at, and then bring that in conversation with the secondary source material. In this case, it was the original score, and the second and third pieces were the recording and the modern score. And in the second part of the project, they were asked to collaborate, to describe what they saw on the page. And in the process of doing this, the idea was that they could both learn something about using digital media, the electronic score, but also to learn how to analyze music and also to look at a physical piece of music. Now, if you were doing this for a class that didn't involve music, the primary source material and the secondary source analysis can still be rolled together to be applicable for your class. Finally, when they've done this, I asked them to come together into special collections and had the archivist actually pull the scores, so they had them available for their own viewing. And what we did in this moment was have them actually talk about what they see there physically, have them touch, manipulate, hold it, and then we listen to the music they found, and they finally bring together the modern score. And so we have all of these three things together working in conversation. Now, again, if this were not a music class, you could do this with primary source material and secondary source material and have them discuss what they found. And sound doesn't necessarily have to be a part of it. However, for this class, it worked particularly well because the students they felt like they had an actual concrete material that they found. They had something that they could go to look at the end. And the result was both an intellectual experience that engaged them orally, but also kinesthetically. And it showed them how you could actually integrate using the library finding secondary materials in its collections, using the electronic catalogs, etc., and also how to use the archives. And finally, when you bring them all together, we have, voila, a mini research project. This is what scholars do on a day-to-day basis, bringing secondary source material in conversation with primary source material. Now, for the purposes of this class, it was simply meant to introduce them to the library and the archives and show them how they can bring them into conversation with one another. However, this can be the basis for, of course, larger projects, showing them how to use the archives, how to find materials, and then building something greater from there. I hope you try it in your class.